I imagine all the plaudits, all the amazing things have been said, and I echo all the incredible things because it's very moving.
But you see, this is how I get to know what people think, because I don't read reviews, so I only get the most sort of reactions I get are either my friends after a screening or people like yourself. So thank you very much.
Yeah, well, I mean, you'll know. You don't need me to tell you whether you did a good job or not. You would have, in the edit, you'd have gone, okay, something's not quite right here. We need to sort it. What I will say is, whether movies go through trends, I don't agree. So I'm not making a link between this and, say, Dunkirk. But what I found, I don't know if it's my sensibility, but the touches of sentimentality here are necessary for the story to really to draw you in. And I don't know if, as a storyteller, you thought, I don't want to go a Kubrickian route. I want to go slightly more. I want to tell these stories in a way that's going to pull the audience in. Can you explain if that was a deliberate sort of emotional ploy, if I can use that word?
Yeah, yes, I wouldn't call it a ploy necessarily. I mean, I feel like, you know, you've got to care about your central characters. End of story, really. And when you talk about Kubrickian route, I suppose by that you mean a slightly colder, slightly more distancing. And I think that here, for me, because my connection with the story was very human and very personal, because it's based on stories my grandfather told me, and I wrote this thing myself. I wanted to feel that same personal connection that I had to a member of my own family. But I do think you have to grow to you sort of grow to become very fond of these boys, and you just engage in story differently if you are invested in the central characters, that's just the sort of stories I like. You know, I hope it's not sentimental, but I want it to be very emotional.
I meant that as a compliment.
Yeah,
no,
don't worry.
But
you see, it's because sometimes it's a pejorative term. But you know, you don't want it to feel like packaged emotional or be manipulated. But it is a very emotional film, and it's not afraid of that, I think.
No, it's beautiful. It really is. Is this what they thought? I was having this argument with this guy at work. I was saying, like, the world we live in now, it is very tempting to think, God, is this what we fought for? You know, like Deliveroo and reality TV, and
that's a bit bleak and cynical. Yeah, but I think I have to say, you're not wrong to think of it in terms of reminding us what they were fighting for, and what they were fighting for was a free and unified Europe. And that is something that's worth remembering these days, particularly in this country. We do well to not forget that. That it wasn't always that way, and we take these things for granted as people born in peacetime. And there's something I wanted to remind people of this war in a way that feels like it was yesterday and not 100 years ago. It's not a history lesson, you know. You don't need to do anything about the First World War, but hopefully by the end of it you will understand and feel a bit more.
My grandfather is still alive. He's 93, and he was in the Second World War, and some of his stories are amazing. And what I love is the way that when they're retold, it's with this kind of it's so clear-eyed, you know. Yeah. It's not they, especially someone like my granddad, sort of northern guy. There's no they're not told with melancholy, really. It's told in a matter of fact way.
Yeah.
The film is dedicated to your grandfather. When he told you these things, did emotion get the better of him, or was he able to explain it in a way that blew your mind, but for him was kind of like, well, that's what we did? That was.
He was a storyteller by trade. He was a novelist, and I think he relished. I think he'd got far enough away from them for them not to still emotionally affect him. So I remember him telling them almost as if they were invented stories, as if they were things that he had, you know, he'd put in his storyteller brain. But at the same time, he was a man who used to wash his hands over and over and over again, incessantly. And I used to say to my dad, why does he wash his hands? And he told me, well, it's because he remembers the mud of the trenches and he could never get clean. So on the one hand, he was able to tell us the stories. On the other hand, he was so still that it just still affected him so much. It was part of the very fibre of who he was in his 70s, which was 60 years after it had happened. So, you know, however much they pretend they have control over these stories, they're in them. You can't, you know, there are things you can't choose to forget.
Yeah, and an amazing cast, very, very quickly. I know Tom, who was in, was just talking about that. When it comes to cast, you've got two brilliant, brilliant leads, but not the most famous men on the planet, and then it's peppered around it with famous people. And I know that me and Tom were arguing that I was annoyed that he went in first, because I said, oh, he's going to be annoyed that I asked this too. But in terms of casting the smaller roles,
Yeah.
huge Hollywood names,
Yeah.
just the best people for the role, or partly in order to,
A bit of both.
You know, you want big names, don't you?
I never cast anyone in the movie that wasn't perfect for the part. I felt, excuse me. So I felt I wanted these actors are famous because they're really good, but at the same time, you know, you do want to support that feeling. You know, people I have to part with them. I want them to come to see it in the cinema, and I wanted, you know, two relative unknowns in the leads. So it's no bad thing to have a Benedict Cumberbatch, a Colin Firth, a Mark Strong, you know, Richard Madden, Andrew Scott, all these bods in the movie, because it gives you what the studio call comfort factor. But for me, they're just great actors, plain and simple, and I feel very fortunate that they're in the movie, you know, given that they're not playing giant roles, but they all make a huge impact on the film.
What? Go!
We're stopping the score, home goal.